My parents invited my parasitic ex-husband to my 55th birthday party as a joke. When I asked them if they were serious, they just laughed, so I made one phone call to my legal team and arranged a surprise of my own that would change their lives, and the guest list forever. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The diagnosis had come 3 weeks earlier, delivered by a doctor with kind eyes and a sterile, sympathetic voice. Acute burnout, compounded by a severe vitamin deficiency and dangerously high blood pressure. "Vanessa," Dr. Evans had said, her hand resting on my chart, "you are a corporate lawyer, not a machine. If you don't stop, your body will stop for you. I'm mandating a 6-week leave of absence. No calls, no emails, no checking in." So here I was, on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my sunlit study, not closing a multi-million-dollar merger, but sorting through floral arrangement options for my 55th birthday party. I felt fragile, like a piece of fine china that had been dropped and hastily glued back together. The stress of the last decade, clawing my way back from the financial and emotional wreckage of my divorce, had finally caught up. This party was supposed to be a celebration, not just of a milestone birthday, but of survival. Of finally being safe, secure, and, for the first time in a long time, at peace. My phone buzzed on the desk, rattling against the porcelain of my teacup. It was my mother, Helen. I smiled, expecting a call about her dress for the party. "Hi, Mom. Perfect timing. Do you prefer peonies or gardenias?" "Oh, peonies, I suppose," she said, her voice breezy. "Though you always overspend on flowers. Now, listen, darling, your father and I have just had the most wonderful idea for your party." I leaned back, swirling the lukewarm tea. "Oh, what's that?" "We were just talking about how you've been so stressed, and we thought, what you really need is a good laugh. You've been so dreadfully serious ever since. Well, you know. It's time to let bygones be bygones." A knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach, a familiar, coiling sensation I got whenever my mother used her retired headmistress, I know best tone. "Mom, what did you do?" "Nothing, darling, we just added a little surprise to the guest list. Your father and I ran into Cameron last week at the golf club, and he looks wonderful. He's really turned a corner, Vanessa. He asked all about you." The teacup slipped from my fingers, crashing onto the antique desk and sending a spray of brown liquid across the polished wood and my cream-colored linen trousers. The sound of the smash seemed to echo in the sudden, roaring silence of my own mind. Cameron, my ex-husband, the man who had systematically emptied our joint accounts, mortgaged our home behind my back, and left me with 6 figures of debt and a hollowed-out shell of a life. The man I hadn't seen in 10 years, not since a judge had signed the final decree. "What did you say?" My voice was barely a whisper. The blood pressure cuff Dr. Evans had prescribed felt like it was squeezing my arm, though it was still in its box. "We invited him to your party." My mother's laugh was a bright, tinkling sound, utterly devoid of understanding. "He was so touched. He said he'd be delighted to come and wish you a happy birthday." I stood up, the chair scraping violently against the floor. My hands were shaking. My heart was not just beating, it was slamming against my rib cage, a panicked bird in a tiny cage. "Are you serious?" I managed to get out, each word costing me. "You invited Cameron to my house." My father, Henry, must have picked up the extension, because his booming, jovial laugh filled the line. "We thought it would be funny, Ness. See the look on your face. Besides, it's been a decade. It's time you got over it." They laughed together. They were actually laughing. At me. At the idea of bringing the man who had nearly destroyed me back into my home as a party favor. As a joke. The fragile china of my recovery, the piece I had spent 10 years meticulously building, shattered in that single, cruel moment of shared laughter. The shock was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs, but as their laughter continued, something else replaced it. A cold, quiet clarity. The kind of razor-sharp focus that had made me one of the top contract lawyers in the city. The fog of my burnout receded, replaced by an icy resolve. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice suddenly calm, flat, and devoid of all emotion. "I have to go. We'll talk about this later." I hung up before they could reply. I didn't clean up the tea. I didn't sit back down. I just stood there, staring at the Rorschach blot stains spreading across my desk, and I felt the last 10 years of pain and humiliation curdle into something new, something hard and unyielding. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of adrenaline and disbelief. The mandated rest Dr. Evans had ordered was a distant memory. My heart hammered with such a painful, frantic rhythm that I was half convinced I was having a heart attack. I paced my study, the shards of the broken teacup crunching under my shoes as my parents' laughter echoed in my head. "We thought it would be funny. It's time you got over it." "Get over it?" I whispered to the empty room. Getting over it had involved 2 years of litigation, selling my condo to pay off the secret debts he'd racked up in my name, and working 80-hour weeks to rebuild my practice from scratch. Getting over it had cost me my 40th decade, my health, and my trust in human decency. And they were the ones who had held my hands through the depositions. They had been my primary witnesses. They had seen the bank statements. They had heard the lies. My hand, still shaking, hovered over my phone. I needed to call them back, to scream, to demand they uninvite him, to make them understand the sheer, monumental cruelty of what they had done. I dialed my mother's number. It rang 5 times before she picked up, her voice still laced with amusement. "Goodness, Vanessa, you hung up so quickly. Your father and I were just saying, we really got you, didn't we?" "Mom, stop," I said, my voice tight. "This isn't funny. You cannot be serious. You have to call him. You have to tell him he isn't welcome." There was a pause. The humor in Helen's voice vanished, replaced by the familiar, icy chill of her disapproval. "Don't be so dramatic, Vanessa. It's done. We already told him you'd be thrilled. He's your family in a way. And frankly, this bitterness you're holding onto is unhealthy. We are trying to help you heal." "Help me?" By inviting the man who forged my signature on a loan application. By bringing the consultant who consulted our life savings into a black hole in the Cayman Islands. "Is that how you're helping me?" "He told us he paid all that back," my father, Henry, interjected, his voice sounding defensive. "He said he's been trying to make amends for years, but you just wouldn't take his calls." "Because he's a con artist," I shrieked, finally losing the composure I prided myself on. "He didn't pay it back, I did. It took me 8 years. 8 years of my life paying for his mistakes." "Now, Vanessa, that's enough," Helen said sharply. "You're hysterical, it's just a party. Cameron was always so charming and he feels terrible about the past. He deserves a second chance. We're his family, too." "We're his family, too." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp as icicles. They had chosen him, over me, over my peace, my safety, my home. The cold, dispassionate behavior from the 2 people who were supposed to be my protectors was more chilling than Cameron's original crime. "Fine," I said. The word was a chip of ice. "If he comes, I will cancel the party." "Don't be ridiculous," Helen scoffed. "Everything is already paid for. All your friends are coming. You would really humiliate yourself and us just to prove a point. Stop being so sensitive, Vanessa. We will see you on Saturday. And do try to be civil." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Humiliate myself? They were worried about their humiliation. A new thought, cold and sharp, pierced through the red fog of my anger. Why? Why now? Why him? It had been 10 years. My parents had loathed him during the divorce. They had sat beside me as I'd cried. What had changed? I sank into my chair, the one facing my wall of diplomas and legal certifications. I was a lawyer. I specialized in contracts, in trusts, in finding the truth hidden in the fine print. I didn't deal in emotion, I dealt in facts. And the facts didn't add up. A vague memory surfaced. My father, Henry, complaining a few weeks ago. That blasted homeowners association at the villa. They're raising the fees again. It's extortion. I had waved it off, told him I'd handle the renewal as always. My parents lived in a luxury retirement villa, the best one in the state. The lease, the fees, the maintenance, all of it was paid for by a trust. A trust that I had set up and that I controlled. A trust that was, at this moment, my parents' entire financial safety net. I thought about their laughter, their coldness, their sudden, inexplicable allegiance to my greatest enemy, and a dark, terrible suspicion began to form. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten who paid the bills. To understand the depth of this betrayal, you have to understand my parents. My mother, Helen, was a retired headmistress. She hadn't just run a school, she had ruled it. She was a woman who believed she knew what was best for everyone, and she would move heaven and earth to impose her vision of best, whether you wanted it or not. She saw emotions as an administrative problem, a messy variable to be tidied up. My bitterness, as she called it, wasn't a wound to be healed. It was a behavioral issue to be corrected. My father, Henry, was a retired dentist, a man who had spent his life dealing with minor pains and superficial pleasantries. He was a follower, a yes man to my mother's no woman. He craved a quiet life, and he would agree to anything, laugh at anything, and ignore anything to avoid a confrontation, especially one with his wife. His jovial, backslapping nature was a mask for a deep-seated moral cowardice. And then there was Cameron. When I met him, I was a 35-year-old partner at my firm, and he was a consultant. That's all he ever called himself, a consultant. It was a word as vague and polished as his appearance. He was handsome, disarmingly so, with a voice that could charm a snake out of its skin. I, a woman who read 100-page contracts for fun, fell for him completely. He was my one great, catastrophic lapse in judgment. I had sacrificed so much for my parents. I was their only child, the miracle baby they'd had late in life. I had been the perfect, dutiful daughter. I'd gotten the scholarships, the law degree, the partnership. When my father's dental practice hit a rough patch, I'd quietly bailaid him out. When my mother decided they deserved a retirement in the sun, I didn't just help them move. I bought the villa, put it in a trust, and funded it, ensuring they would live out their days in a luxury they had not earned, all while I was still paying off the debts Cameron had left me. My devotion was absolute. My financial support, unconditional. The divorce had been a public interest story in our small, affluent community. Top lawyer swindled by con man husband. Cameron had been brilliant in his sociopathy. He had used my own money to fund a lifestyle I didn't even know he had. A second apartment, lavish business trips, investments that vanished overnight. He specialized in finding insecure, successful women and bleeding them dry. He had found 2 others before me, and I'd later learned, at least one after. During the divorce, my parents had been my staunchest defenders, at least publicly. That man is a parasite, my mother had declared at a club luncheon. He is dead to this family, my father had announced on the golf course. Their social standing had taken a hit because of me, and they'd never let me forget the embarrassment I had caused them. Now, suddenly, the parasite was back, and my parents were the ones inviting him in. Why? The question beat in my head like a drum. It wasn't just a joke. It was a move, a calculated play. My lawyer's brain, now fully online, began to run the variables. Cameron never did anything without a financial motive. And my parents, for all their bluster, were easily manipulated by anyone who flattered them. I looked at the phone, my heart still cold. They had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just their daughter. I was their benefactor. And the renewal for that luxury lease, the one for their beautiful, sun-drenched villa, was sitting on my desk, right next to the stain from the broken teacup. It was due in 2 weeks, and it required my signature. My mother's words came back to me. He deserves a second chance. My father's. We ran into him at the golf club. Cameron wouldn't be at that club unless he was a guest. He couldn't afford the membership. Who had brought him? My parents. They hadn't run into him. They had met him. This wasn't a recent development. This had been happening for weeks, maybe months. They had been lying to me. The betrayal was no longer just about the party. This was a conspiracy. The shift from passive victim to active strategist was as simple as opening my laptop. The fog of my mandated rest was gone, replaced by the familiar, cold fire of litigation. I was no longer a daughter reeling from a betrayal. I was a lawyer building a case. My first call was not to my parents, but to a man named Marcus, a private investigator I'd used on a contentious corporate merger case 2 years prior. Marcus was discreet, expensive, and ruthlessly efficient. "Marcus," I said, my voice crisp, "I have a job for you. I need a full financial and personal workup on a man named Cameron Reeves. Age 57, last known profession, consultant. I need to know his bank account status, his credit score, any outstanding liens or judgments, and most importantly, I need a log of all his meetings and communications for the last 6 weeks. I have a specific interest in his contact with 2 individuals, Helen and Henry Walker." "Walker," Marcus said, "any relation?" "My parents," I said flatly. "I want to know where they met when they met and what they've been discussing. I need it by Friday." "Friday is tight, Vanessa. It'll cost you." "I don't care about the cost," I said and hung up. My next call was to my legal assistant, Sarah. "Sarah, I know I'm on leave, but I need you to pull a file. It's the Walker Family Trust." "Yes, that one. I need you to scan and email me the entire original agreement, paying close attention to the revocation and signatory clauses. And Sarah, this is between us." "Of course, Vanessa. I'll have it to you in 20 minutes. While I waited, I opened the file for the retirement villa. Sunset Palms Estates. I read the lease agreement I had signed 5 years ago. The renewal was, as I'd remembered, due by the 1st of the month. My signature, as the sole trustee of the Walker Family Trust, was the only one that mattered. Without it, the lease would terminate, and my parents would have 30 days to vacate. The clever trap wasn't something I had to build. It was something I had already created. Years ago, to protect them, I had structured the trust to give myself, the trustee, ultimate authority. It was a standard ironclad agreement designed to protect the assets from outside influence. I had, in effect, protected my parents' assets from everyone, including, as it turned out, themselves. Sarah's email arrived. I read the trust document, my own legal jargon staring back at me. I had the power. I had always had the power. I had just never, in a million years, imagined I would have to use it against them. I spent the next 48 hours in a fugue state. I ate nothing. I slept little. I just sat at my desk, the dried tea stain a brown, ugly reminder of the moment my life had fractured. I was no longer planning a party. I was planning a war. On Friday morning, Marcus's report landed in my inbox. It was worse than I could have imagined. Cameron was not just in financial trouble, he was ruined. He was being sued by 2 different investors in New York. A lien had been placed on his last known address in Miami, and he had a judgment against him in California for fraud. He was, to put it in legal terms, a toxic asset. And then there was the surveillance log. Week 1, Cameron Reeves observed meeting Henry Walker at the Sunset Palms golf course. Lunch follows. Cameron pays, with a credit card that Marcus noted was 90 days delinquent. Week 2, Cameron Reeves observed meeting Helen and Henry Walker for dinner at the Coastal Grill. 3-hour-long meeting. Photographs attached show Helen Walker dabbing her eyes with a napkin and Cameron holding her hand across the table. Week 4, Cameron Reeves observed at a local bank branch with Henry Walker, attempting to be added as a signatory to an account. The transaction was denied by the bank manager. They hadn't just been in contact. They were being actively courted, conned, and manipulated. Cameron was trying to get his hands on their money, which, by extension, meant my money, and they, blinded by his charm or their own bizarre narrative of forgiveness, were letting him. The joke of inviting him to my party wasn't a joke at all. It was a test. It was his way of seeing how much control he had gained, how far he could push, how much they would choose him over me. The report concluded with a final, devastating detail. A transcript of a phone call Marcus had intercepted. "Helen, she's just so stubborn, Cameron, so unforgiving. She's not the daughter we raised. Cameron, Helen, she's been through a lot. She's lashing out. But she's got all that money, all that security. And you two are stuck in this place with her holding all the cards. It's not right. A daughter shouldn't control her parents like that. You deserve your independence. Henry, he's right, Helen. We should be able to decide who we see. We should be in charge of our own finances. Cameron, and that's what I want to help you with. Once Vanessa sees me at the party, once she sees we are all one big, happy family again, I'm sure she'll soften. And if she doesn't, well, we can talk about other options. There are ways to contest a trust, especially when the trustee is unwell. I felt the blood drain from my face. Unwell. They were using my burnout against me. They weren't just being manipulated. They were active participants. They were plotting to take my money, to use my ex-husband to break the very trust I had set up to protect them. The ice in my veins was no longer just resolve. It was fury. I didn't call, I didn't text, I drove. I broke my mandated quarantine, got in my car, and drove the 45 minutes to Sunset Palms. Marcus's report a lead weight on the passenger seat. I didn't know what I was going to say. I just knew that the time for phone calls was over. I used my own key to let myself into their villa. It was immaculate, as always. Decorated in a style my mother called coastal chic. It was all whites and beiges and blues, a sterile, showroom-perfect environment that held no trace of our family's messy history. They were in the living room, watching a game show. They looked up, startled. When I walked in, "Vanessa," my father Henry exclaimed, a forced smile spreading across his face as he fumbled for the remote. "What a surprise, we thought you were resting." "We need to talk," I said. I placed the report on the glass coffee table. My mother Helen looked from the folder to my face. Her headmistress mask snapped into place. "Vanessa, you look dreadful, and you've interrupted our program. Whatever it is, can it wait?" "No, it can't," I said. "I know, Mom, I know everything." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm talking about Cameron. I'm talking about the golf course. I'm talking about the coastal grill. I'm talking about you and Dad trying to add him as a signatory to your bank account." The color drained from Henry's face. He looked like a fish, his mouth opening and closing silently. Helen, however, stiffened, her eyes narrowed. "You've been spying on us, your own parents." "I've been protecting my assets," I retorted, my voice as cold as hers. "The same assets you live on. The same assets you're apparently planning to contest with the help of a convicted con artist." "He is not," Henry spluttered. He's had some bad luck." He explained everything. "Did he?" I opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It was the one from the restaurant, of Cameron holding my mother's hand as she cried. Did he explain this? Did he explain that he's being sued for fraud in 2 states? That he has a judgment against him in a 3rd? Did he explain that the credit card he used to buy your lunch was 90 days past due? Helen looked at the photo, then at me, her face a mask of indignation. "He feels remorse, Vanessa, something you seem incapable of understanding. He came to us because he wanted to make things right. He knows he hurt you, and he knows you've poisoned us against him. He was just trying to apologize." "He's trying to get my money, Mom," I shouted, the dam of my composure finally breaking. "And you are lapping it up, you're letting him, after everything he did to us." "Don't you raise your voice to me," Helen shot back, rising to her feet. "We invited him to the party because we want this family to heal, and if you are too selfish and bitter to see that, then that is your problem. Cameron is a changed man, and he is welcome in our lives, whether you like it or not." "A changed man?" I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "A changed man who's telling you to contest the trust, to claim I'm unwell so you can get your hands on the principal. Is that the healing you're talking about?" Henry finally found his voice, though it was weak and trembling. He was just worried about us, Ness," he said. "He said you had too much control, that it wasn't healthy. He just wants to help us be independent." "Independent?" I tapped the folder. Your independence is a line item in my budget. Your independence is a lease I sign. You have no money, Dad. Cameron bankrupted me, and you've spent your entire lives living off me. The only thing you're independent of is reality. That was the moment. The poorly executed threat came, not from Cameron, but from my own mother. Helen drew herself up, her face pale with fury. You will not speak to us that way. You will go to that party, and you will be civil to Cameron. You will welcome him, and you will apologize for this. This tantrum, or what? Or you'll... What, Vanessa? You'll disown us? You'll cut us off? You won't. You're our daughter. You'll do what's right. It wasn't a question. It was a command. A threat. They were calling my bluff. They truly believed I was weak. That my love for them, my sense of duty, was a weapon they could use against me. I looked at their faces, my mother's, twisted with self-righteous anger, and my father's, crumpled in weak confusion. They had made their choice. I picked up the report. You're right, Mom. I am your daughter, I said, my voice quiet again. The party is on Saturday. I will see you all there. Please make sure Cameron comes. I wouldn't want him to miss it. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. My parents, emboldened by my seeming capitulation, were insufferable. My mother called twice a day, not to apologize, but to coordinate. Vanessa, Cameron is wondering about the dress code. I told him cocktail attire, is that right? Vanessa, Cameron is allergic to shellfish. You'll need to tell the caterer. He's not being difficult, he's just sensitive. Each call was a fresh twist of the knife. They were flaunting him. They were rubbing my face in their victory. Cameron, meanwhile, was silent. He was too smart to call me directly. He was letting my parents do his dirty work, secure in his position as the peacemaker. But while they were planning the menu, I was building my case. The investigation was no longer about if they were conspiring. It was about how to dismantle them. Marcus uncovered the oath. Our options, Cameron had mentioned. He had already contacted a bottom-feeding probate lawyer, a man known for contesting wills and trusts on behalf of disgruntled relatives. They were preparing to file a motion claiming I was medically and emotionally unfit to serve as trustee, citing my mandated leave of absence as proof of my instability. They were going to use my burnout, a condition they had largely contributed to paint me as incompetent. The rage that filled me was so pure, so cold, it was almost peaceful. It burned away the last vestiges of my doubt. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a war. I gathered my proof. Not just Marcus's report, but the original loan documents Cameron had forged. The court judgments from his other victims, which I'd had overnighted from New York and California. I even found the woman he dated after me, a retired doctor from Miami, and she was more than happy to provide a sworn affidavit detailing how he'd consulted her out of her retirement savings. The stakes were clear. If I did nothing, I would lose everything. They would drag me into a messy, public legal battle using my private health information as a weapon. They would bleed me dry, just as Cameron had done before. This time, my own parents would be holding me down. The night before the party, I had a second confrontation. My mother called, not about the party, but with a demand. Vanessa, your father and I have been talking with Cameron, and he's right. It's time for a change. We want to be in control of our own finances. We want you to dissolve the trust. I sat in the dark of my study, the city lights twinkling below. Dissolve the trust, Mom, and do what? Just hand you the principal, hand it to him. It's our money, she insisted. We're your parents, you owe us. Cameron has been helping us understand our rights. He's arranged a meeting with a new financial advisor for us next week. A financial advisor, I repeated, my voice dead. I'm sure he has. Let me guess, his name is Mr. Smith, and his office is a P.O. box. You're being disrespectful, she shrieked. We are telling you, not asking. You will start the paperwork to dissolve the trust, or we will have Cameron's lawyer do it for us. We have rights, Vanessa. We will not be controlled by you any longer. The spell wasn't just working, it was complete. They were his. He had turned them against me so completely that they were willing to destroy me to get what they wanted. Okay, Mom, I said, the words tasting like ash. You're right, we need to talk about this. Let's do it at the party. Tomorrow night, in front of everyone, we can lay all the cards on the table. We can talk about your rights and my control and Cameron's financial advice. Let's clear the air once and for all. There was a pause, even she seemed to sense the danger in my tone. What do you mean? I mean, it's my 55th birthday. A milestone. It's the perfect time for new beginnings. I'll see you tomorrow, Mom, and please make sure you bring Cameron. I hung up, the trap was set. The bait was taken. All they had to do was walk into it. The party was in full swing. My house, which I had reclaimed and rebuilt, was filled with flowers, music, and the low hum of genuine friendship. My partners from the firm, my neighbors, the few friends who had stuck by me through the divorce, they were all here. I moved through the crowd, accepting birthday wishes, my stomach a tight knot of anxiety and steel. I was dressed in a crimson-red dress, a color I'd chosen specifically. It was the color of power. Then they arrived. The music seemed to dip as my mother, Helen, my father, Henry, and Cameron walked through the door. My parents flanked him like a royal guard, beaming with proprietary pride. Cameron himself looked unchanged. He wore an expensive-looking suit, probably bought with a bad check, and that same, effortless, charming smile that had once captivated me and now just made me sick. He was 57 but looked a decade younger, a testament to a life lived on other people's money. My mother spotted me and waved, a grand theatrical gesture. "Vanessa, darling, look who's here." The entire party turned. Silence fell. My friends, who knew the story, looked horrified. I walked towards them, a glass of sparkling water in my hand. "Cameron," I said, my voice perfectly even. "What a surprise, I can't say it's good to see you." He laughed that smooth, practiced laugh. "Oh, Vanessa, still so dramatic, happy birthday. Your parents insisted I come, I just wanted to wish you well. And," he added, lowering his voice, "to let you know there are no hard feelings. It's time to let the past go, don't you think?" He reached out as if to touch my arm. I stepped back. "You're right, Cameron," I said, my voice ringing out in the sudden quiet. "It is time to let the past go. In fact, I was hoping we could all clear the air." I turned to the small jazz trio I'd hired. "Excuse me, gentlemen, could you take a break? Thank you." I picked up the microphone they'd been using. My heart was a hammer. "Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming to my 55th birthday. It means more to me than you know." I looked around the room at the confused, concerned faces of my friends. Most of you know what I went through 10 years ago. Most of you were here to help me pick up the pieces, and you all know the man who held the hammer. I pointed the microphone at Cameron. His smile wavered just for a second. "What you don't know," I continued, "is that this man has been consulting with my parents for the last 6 weeks. He's been convincing them that I am the problem, that I am unwell, that the trust I set up to protect them and give them a life of luxury is actually a cage I've built to control them." My mother's face was a picture of fury. "Vanessa, stop this right now. You are embarrassing yourself." "Am I, Mom?" I turned to her. "Or am I just getting started? You see, this joke of inviting Cameron here tonight, it wasn't a joke. It was a power play. They've been meeting with a lawyer. They're planning to sue me, to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can dissolve the trust and give their, and my, money to this parasite." A collective gasp went through the room. Henry looked like he was about to be sick. "Vanessa, that's a lie," Cameron said, stepping forward, his charm curdling into anger. "Your parents are worried about you. We're all worried about you." "Are you, Cameron?" I walked over to a table where I'd left a single, thick folder. "Are you worried about me? Or are you worried about the 2 fraud cases pending against you in New York? Or the judgment in California? Or perhaps you're worried about Dr. Elizabeth Stern, who, by the way, sends her regards. She was fascinated to hear you were trying the same scam on my family." I opened the folder and threw a stack of papers onto the floor at his feet. They were his court judgments, his bank statements, the affidavit from Dr. Stern. Cameron's face went white. He looked at the papers, then at me, all pretense of charm gone. He was a cornered rat. I turned to my parents. My mother was shaking with rage. My father was crying silently. "Mom, Dad, you came here tonight expecting me to roll over. You laughed at me when I was in pain. You plotted against me with the man who nearly destroyed my life. You called me unwell and sensitive. You made your choice." I held up a single, crisp piece of paper. "This," I said, "is the lease renewal for your villa. It was due on my desk yesterday. I was supposed to sign it so you could continue to live in your cage." I walked over to the fireplace where a low fire was burning. "And this," I said, holding up a second set of papers, "is a 1-year lease I signed this morning. It's for a very clean, very functional 1-bedroom apartment at the Sunset Arms. Not the Palms. It's right above a very loud laundromat. And this," I held up a small key, "is the key. Your independence starts on the 1st of the month. You have 30 days to vacate my property." My mother let out a sound, a strangled sob of pure, unadulterated fury. You can't." "I can," I said, my voice breaking, not with sadness, but with the sheer, crushing weight of their betrayal. "I did. You wanted to change the guest list. Fine, I've changed it. You're out, both of you." I looked at Cameron, who was already inching toward the door. "As for you," I said, "my friends from the district attorney's office were very interested in Dr. Stern's affidavit, as were your parole officers in New York. I'd expect a call." That was the final blow. Cameron didn't say a word. He turned and fled. He ran out of my house. My mother, Helen, pointed a trembling finger at me. You will regret this. You will be old and alone. You are no daughter of mine." "You're right," I said, finally letting the tears come. "I'm not. Your daughter was someone you could manipulate and laugh at and betray. That person is gone. Now please get out of my house." My father, Henry the coward, didn't even look at me. He just grabbed my mother's arm and they walked out, leaving a trail of stunned silence in their wake. The guest list had been changed forever. The downfall was swift and it was total. Cameron was arrested 2 days later. He didn't even make it out of the state. The outstanding warrants, combined with the new evidence from Dr. Stern and the clear-cut case of his conspiracy to commit fraud against me, were enough. He was extradited to New York, where he faced a judge who was not charmed by his smile. He received a sentence that, at 57, was effectively a life term. My parents, true to form, tried to fight. My mother, in a fit of delusion, actually tried to hire the probate lawyer Cameron had recommended. The lawyer, upon hearing that their assets were, in fact, gone and their ennui. LL daughter was a senior partner at one of the city's top law firms, dropped their case so fast it left an echo. They had no choice. They moved into the 1-bedroom apartment at Sunset Arms. My mother's coastal chic furniture wouldn't fit, so they had to sell it for pennies on the dollar. The 1st of the month came, and I received a single, vitriolic text from my mother. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed this family." I wrote back one word. "No, you did." I blocked their numbers. The weeks that followed were strange. The house was quiet. My mandated leave of absence became a time of genuine healing. I had my locks changed. I sold the guest furniture they had used. I went back to Dr. Evans, who, after hearing the story, took my blood pressure and smiled. "Well," she said, "it seems you've performed a successful, if radical, extraction of the 2 largest sources of your stress." I began to heal. I learned to sleep through the night. I took up gardening. I reconnected with the friends who had stood by me, who had watched me execute the most painful decision of my life and had not judged, but had simply brought over wine and sat with me in the quiet. 6 months later, I received a letter. It was from my father. It was halting, full of his usual weak platitudes, but hidden in the lines of "Your mother is struggling" and "It's very loud here." There was one sentence that stood out. "I am sorry, Vanessa, it was never a joke. It was just greed, and we were wrong." I didn't write back, but I did make a phone call. I set up a small, anonymous stipend, managed by a third party, to be delivered to my father's personal account. Enough for him to buy groceries or a pair of headphones to block out the laundromat. It was not forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement that he, at least, was capable of one small, private moment of truth. My mother never reached out. I heard, through the grapevine, that she had taken a job as a receptionist at a local community center. The former headmistress, now answering phones. My 56th birthday was a quiet affair, just me and a few close friends in my garden. There were no jokes. There were no surprises. There was just peace. I had lost my parents, but I had reclaimed my life. The house was mine, the money was mine, my future was mine. The guest list was finally, blessedly, secure, and the only person on it was me.